I'm going to start with a video from the Bible Project on the book of Proverbs. Let me just mention that the guy who makes these, he believes that fear does not involve any kind of terror. And a lot of scholars agree with him, but I'm not one of those. I think he's wrong on that, but you'll have to make that decision for yourself. That's a minor point, though. But the video is really good. It's very fast. He talks fast. So I gave you room there in those boxes to take notes if you want, although you probably won't have time to take notes. And on the last page, the whole chart is filled in exactly as it appears on the screen, so that way you don't have to feel like, oh, I got to write that down. It's all there on the last page. So we'll just watch it, get what you can, because it is a helpful video.
The book of Proverbs. The word proverb typically refers to a short, clever saying that offers some kind of wisdom, and this book has a lot of those. But they're almost all in the center section of the book, chapters 10 to 29. But there is way more going on in the book of Proverbs, especially at the beginning, chapters 1 through 9, and the conclusion, chapters 30 and 31. The book's been designed with an introduction, chapter 1, verses 1 through 9, and it first of all links this book to King Solomon. Now remember the story in 1 Kings chapter 3. Solomon had asked God for wisdom to lead Israel well. And so Solomon became known as the wisest man in the ancient world. And we're told in 1 Kings chapter 4 that he wrote thousands of proverbs and poems and collected knowledge about plants and animals. So Solomon was like the fountainhead of Israel's wisdom literature. So while not all the material in this book is written by him personally, he is where Israel's wisdom tradition began. The introduction says that by reading this book, you too can gain wisdom. Now, wisdom for most of us means knowledge, but the Hebrew word chokhmah means much more than just mental activity. It refers to action also. So think skill or applied knowledge. This is why back in the book of Exodus, chapter 31, it was artists and craftsmen in Israel who were said to have chokhmah. So the purpose of this book is to help you develop a set of practical skills for living well in God's world. And this gets linked with another key idea in the introduction, the fear of the Lord. Now, fear here is not about terror. It's about a healthy sense of reverence and awe for God and about my place in the universe. It's a moral mindset that recognizes I am not God and that I don't get to make up my own definitions of good and evil and right and wrong. Rather, I need to humble myself before God and embrace God's definition of right and wrong, even when that's inconvenient for me. Now, this introduction leads us into the first main section of the book, chapters 1 through 9, which also doesn't contain short one-liner proverbs. Rather, what we find here are 10 speeches from a father to a son about how the son should listen to wisdom and cultivate the fear of the Lord and live accordingly, which means a life of virtue and integrity and generosity, all of which lead to success and peace. And the father warns his son also about folly and evil and stupid decisions that will breed selfishness and pride, all leading to ruin and shame. And so the son should make the pursuit of wisdom and the fear of the Lord his highest goal in life. And this way of thinking, it forms the moral logic of this entire book. Now, these speeches from the father also clue us into what biblical wisdom literature is and how it's different from other parts of the Bible. These books explore how to live well in God's world, but wisdom is not the same as law, like what Moses gave Israel at Mount Sinai. And it's not the same as prophecy, divine speech to God's people. Rather, wisdom literature has the accumulated insight of God's people through the generations about how to live in a way that honors God and others. And so, through the book of Proverbs now, these human words about wisdom have been put together as God's word and wisdom to his people, which connects to the other thing you find in chapters 1 through 9. There are 4 poems from Lady Wisdom. Here, wisdom has been poetically personified as a woman who calls out to humanity to pay attention and to seek her. Wisdom says that she is woven into the fabric of the universe, and so wherever you see people making making wise decisions, they are relying on her. So you see someone being generous or having sexual integrity or upholding justice. They are drawing on wisdom. These Lady Wisdom poems, they're a creative, poetic way of exploring this idea that we live in God's moral universe, and that goodness and justice are objective realities that we ignore to our own peril. And so fearing the Lord, living wisely, it's living along the grain of the universe. Now together, these two sets of speeches from the Father and Lady Wisdom, they make a powerful claim about this book, that you're not simply reading good advice, you're reading God's own invitation to learn wisdom from previous generations. And so in the next section of the book, chapters 10 through 29, we find hundreds of ancient proverbs, and they apply wisdom and the fear of the Lord to every life topic you could imagine: family, work, neighborhood, friendship, sex, marriage, money, anger, forgiveness, alcohol, debt, everything. And these are all filtered through the value system of Proverbs 1 through 9. Now, these Proverbs, they're all pretty short. They're easy to memorize. And actually, this section of the book is meant to become a reference work that you return to time and time again throughout the years, which raises some important issues in learning how to read these Proverbs. First of all, Proverbs are by nature about probabilities. So you fear the Lord and you make wise, good choices, things will likely go well for you. And if you don't fear the Lord, you're foolish, your life will likely not go so well. Now, that is all often true, but not always. Which leads to the next point, that Proverbs are not promises. They're not formulas for success. So, some Proverbs, for example: the fear of the Lord prolongs your life, but the years of the wicked are cut short. Or, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they won't turn from it. So yes, fearing God, being a moral person, will most likely lead to a better, longer life, and raising your kids in a stable, loving home does set them up well, but there are no guarantees. Lots of things can and often do go wrong in our world. And so lastly, Proverbs by nature focus on the general rule, but not the exceptions, which are many. And the wisdom books actually aren't ignorant of that. The exceptions are what the other wisdom books, Job and Ecclesiastes, are all about. And together, these acknowledge that life is too complex for simple formulas, which is why we need all of the wisdom books together to get the bigger picture. This all leads to the final section of the book, two large collections of poems. First, poems from a man named Agur, who begins by acknowledging his own ignorance and folly and his great need for God's wisdom. And then Agur discovers that divine wisdom has been given to him in the scriptures, which teach him how to live well. And so Agur is put before us as like a model reader of the book of Proverbs, somebody who's always open to hearing God's wisdom through the scriptures. The final poems are connected to a man named Lemuel. He's a non-Israelite king, and he passes on the wisdom that was given to him by his mom. It's guidance for being a wise and just leader. And then the final poem is an acrostic or an alphabet poem where each line begins with a new letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And the entire poem's about the woman of noble character. It depicts a woman who lives according to the wisdom of Proverbs and stands like a model of someone who takes God's wisdom and then translates it into practical decisions in everyday life, at work or at home, in her family and in her community. So the book opened with words from a father to a son about listening to Lady Wisdom, and so now the book closes by offering the words of a mother to her son about a woman who lives wisely. The book of Proverbs is for every person in every season of life. It's a guide for living wisely and well in God's good world. And that's what the book of Proverbs is all about.
Okay, so hopefully you read 1 through 9, or much of it. And also the video, if you didn't read it, the video mentions some of this. So who are the major characters in this book? What voices do we hear?
Father.
Okay, good. Yeah, number 1, the parents. What other voices do we hear? Yeah, Lady Wisdom. That's put that as number 3. I'm trying to do a contrast situation. What other voices do we hear in this book? In just in chapters 1 through 9. Yeah, the characters in this book we're hearing them talk or we're hearing about them.
God.
Yeah, number 5. The Lord, Yahweh.
Well, we hear the bad boys inciting mischief.
Good. Yeah, so that'd be number 2. In contrast to the parents giving good advice, we have the wicked giving bad advice. Come, let's be robbers together. Get rich easy. So the wicked is number 2 in contrast to the parents.
The promiscuous lady.
Okay, yes. Let's not write that one down yet. Let's first say who's in contrast to Lady Wisdom. Although, of course, the promiscuous lady fits in that one too. But there's a more specific...
The foolish?
Yes, and it's personified by Lady Folly. There's another personification. So when we talk about personification, it's giving human characteristics to an inanimate thing. Like, for example, you could personify freedom and say freedom is a very gentle friend, but if you get him mad, find out how strong he is, or something like that, right? Meaning, don't mess with our freedoms. So that's a personification is just talking about it as though it's a person. So, Lady Wisdom and Lady Folly are 2 characters in this book. And then, number 6, we come to the adulterous woman. Now, it's called adulterous because in the ancient world, if you were promiscuous, that meant you were already married. All prostitutes were married. That's just the way it worked in their culture. So actually, the adulterous woman, though, could fit in slots 2, 4, or 6, because obviously she's in contrast to Yahweh, to the Lord and what He wants and His plan. Obviously, she's in contrast to Lady Wisdom, because it's unwise, and she's in contrast to what the parents would advise. Stay away from her. Okay, so those are the voices that we're hearing. Now, what are some of the major themes in 1 through 9? Topics that come up multiple times.
Would it be discernment?
Yeah. Good. Discernment. What else comes up?
Listening.
Very good. Listening. And a lot of these things that come up in contrasting pairs also. For example, along with listening, a contrasting pair that comes up with that is pride versus humility. Okay, you see how that comes up in connection with listening sometimes, and other times on its own. What else did you notice was mentioned multiple times?
The value of wisdom.
The what?
Value of
Yeah, very good. That's going to be this concept, the value of wisdom, is going to be, we're going to spend a lot of time on that. Obviously, wisdom is the main theme of the book, too. What else? You can page through.
Would understanding be one? I saw it mentioned.
Yeah, oh yeah, it comes up often. Understanding and discernment, and those have different.
Knowledge.
Yeah, good. So Some things you can just know, other things you need to understand, other things you have to discern to understand what the truth is. Very good. Yeah. Life is a big theme, specifically long life versus a short life. Some people are cut short. But long life is mentioned many, many times. And really you could say life versus death, because death is mentioned a lot, and the death in the grave is mentioned a lot also.
Always fear of the Lord.
Good. Yeah.
Reverence, fear.
What did you say?
Reverence.
Yeah, yeah. That's the key theme that gets mentioned at least 3 times in 1 through 9. Maybe 4 or 5. I can't remember.
Prosperity.
Good. Very good. This is a big thing. Prosperity versus what?
Poverty.
Yeah.
Well, even destruction.
Yeah, good. Are you meaning that as in contrast to this?
Yeah.
Okay. My writing's going to get crooked because it's hard to write at that angle.
Guidance, especially for the young.
Yeah, I'll fit it in here. Especially for the young, that's another theme, young versus old. Could be potentially young versus wise. I think in the ancient mind that was almost synonymous, but not always.
Would discretion be one? Learning discretion, or is that working with discernment?
Yeah.
That part of discernment and understanding and knowledge, we learn discretion.
It would be, I think, a mix between listening and discerning when to speak, when not to speak. Discretion is not a word we use very often, so
I noticed it a few times though.
yeah, being discreet is often the wise path. Speaking of which, I don't know if you noticed, this took me a long, probably the longest to note. Well, there's 2 that took me weeks to notice in preparing for this and reading 1 through 9 over and over and over. I finally noticed that there's a huge theme of your path. It's so, or your way sometimes. It's so, I don't know what the word is. It's just not very noticeable. You don't think about it as a theme. It's like the path of the wicked, the path of the righteous. It just talks about paths and ways, the path of the adulterous, the path of the faithful. But it just comes up over and over. The Lord will guide your path. The Lord will make your path straight. Okay. Well, give time to get one more from you, and then I'll just give you some others that I found. Anybody noticed anything in particular? I heard righteousness, and I heard something else. What was the other thing you said, Bev? Righteousness.
Perils.
Oh, yeah. Dangers? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes paths leading to safety, paths leading to danger. Maybe you could say consequences. And then here's just some other ones, and there's probably more than what I've written down here, but obviously adultery versus faithfulness. It's strange that it's unexpected that that's such a big theme in this book. Shame versus honor. Did you notice that? And then a connecting theme with that would be your name. Laziness versus hardworkingness. I think we said righteous, that would be versus wicked. So also speech came up a lot. People giving speeches to others, listening to speeches. When should you rebuke someone? What is your speech? What do you say? And then rebuke was the other theme that took me a long time to notice. And I noticed it personally because Lady Wisdom was saying, first Lady Wisdom said, because you didn't listen to my rebuke, I'm going to laugh when your day of calamity comes. And I thought to myself, boy, I want to listen to her rebuke. In what way is she rebuking me personally? And so I got a different color highlighter and started highlighting all the things that were rebukes to me because I don't want to not listen to those. And then I started, because I was thinking along those lines, the next time I went through it, I kept noticing all the times rebuke came up. Rule is another theme. Not a super significant one in chapters 1 through 9. Justice was a big theme. That would go along with righteousness, though. And then one last thing that I noticed was the idea of the fabric of the universe. The way God made this world was through wisdom. So those are some themes. We'll refer back to those later. Now, let's talk about some rewards. I think at the bottom of your page it might have 2 questions, or is it the top of the next page? Yeah. So question 1 is, what are the rewards of studying the book of Proverbs? In a nutshell, just, Yeah, exactly, gaining wisdom. That's the reward. And then question 2, I said, what are the rewards of wisdom? What I really should have said is, what are some of the specific rewards? That's the nutshell, but what are some of the specific rewards for studying this book and taking it into your heart? What are some of the specific rewards? And that's going to be a lot. That's what you were supposed to look through as you went. But before we jump into you listing those, let's turn to page 2 and go through chapter 2 together. We're going to see some of the rewards in this, and the structure of chapter 2 is just too helpful to not talk about it. Okay. Nancy, could you read chapter 2, verses 2 through 4? No, 1 through 4, sorry.
Where's 1? It starts at 2.
Well, that's chapter 2. That's why I said 2 accidentally.
All right. My son, if you accept my words and store up my commands within you, turning your ear to wisdom and applying your heart to understanding. Indeed, if you call out for insight and cry aloud for understanding, and if you look for it as for silver and search for it as for hidden treasure.
Okay, so then the verse 5 starts with the word then. So that then, do you think that's time then? Like I'll do this and then I'll do this?
I think it's as a result.
As a result. It's a result then, because in 2, 3, and 4 it says if you do such and such. If you do such and such. No, it's 1, 3, and 4. But 2 is the continuation of the if from verse 1. If you do this, if you do this, if you do this, then you'll get this. So, what are the things verses 1 through 4 are saying? If you do these, then you'll get the result. They're all the same kind of idea. If you accept, if you store up, if you turn your ear, if you apply your heart. Verse 3, if you call out, if you cry out, if you look for it, if you search for it. What can you sum those all up? I just went through the
Wisdom and understanding.
wisdom and understanding. Yes, that's so. The end of each line is the words, the commands, the wisdom, the understanding, the insight, the understanding, and then it in verse 4. But that's what it means. Those things. But what's the action? Can you sum up all of those actions in one word?
Protection, success.
Well, that's going to be the results. That's going to be the then.
It's conditional. Conditional to doing those things.
To doing, yeah, the doing the things, and it's all seeking, right? Right? The turning your ear, applying your heart, calling out for it, crying out, looking for it like silver, searching for it like hidden treasure.
So could you say you're seeking God, if you seek God's will for your life, by doing each of those things?
Well, I would say that's probably true, but I think these verses are more specifically talking about submitting to wisdom and to this book. The speaker, the author of this book.
So it's seeking wisdom and understanding?
It's seeking wisdom and understanding. Yes, which requires you to accept the words of the speaker. That's the first line. If you don't accept someone's words, well, then you're certainly not seeking. And it also requires you to store up these commands within you. Because if you read through Proverbs and you're like, oh, there's a lot of wisdom in there, but then you go your way and you forget it, you haven't stored it up, then you're not going to be applying it. You're not going to be using it. Calling out for it, searching for it like hidden treasure. All that seeking. So when Jesus says, if you seek, you find, he was raised in this, reading this, and many other books, of course, from the Old Testament. But okay, so if you do that, if you seek with all your heart, then what will happen? Let's read verse 5. Loretta?
Then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God.
Almost at first feels like a non sequitur. Like, if you really seek for wisdom, you'll find the fear of the Lord. That's weird. But what do we know about the fear of the Lord from chapter 1?
Fear of the Lord is the beginning.
It's the beginning, yeah. Because fearing the Lord is the starting point of wisdom, then if you're seeking wisdom, that's the first thing you'll get.
You have to accept his authority.
Right. Yes. He is the source. If you look at verse 6, here's why. Because, here's why you're going to get that first. Because the Lord gives wisdom. If you're seeking for wisdom, you're truly seeking for wisdom, you are only going to find it from the Lord. Which means you're going to find the fear of the Lord first. Because if you're going to go down the path of wisdom, step 1 is the fear of the Lord. That's going to be the first thing you find. Because the only way to continue down the path of wisdom is through the Lord, because, verse 6, for the Lord gives wisdom. He is the source of wisdom. Really, he's the source of everything good, which is where the rest of these verses go in 6, 7, and 8. I'm sorry, I forget your first name. Pat, right. Could you read 6, 7, and 8?
For the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. He holds success in store for the upright. He is a shield to those whose walk is blameless. For he guards the course of the just and protects the way of his faithful ones.
Okay, so you notice the Lord is not just the source of wisdom. He's the source of success and protection, guarding, being a shield. Okay, and then what other theme in those verses that Pat just read, what other theme of this book, which we didn't mention when we listed themes, but what other theme comes up here?
Success.
Yeah, success and maybe we said protection. Maybe we did. But and notice it's again, there's so many times. That's why I mentioned in the little prologue at the beginning, the riddles of the wise. So many times you're like, that's not what you would expect. Now, if you've been reading Proverbs all your life, sometimes you're so familiar with it you forget to look for things that seem odd, but it seems like those who seek for wisdom will get the fear of the Lord. Okay, we understand. First that was confusing, but we understand that. Because it comes from Him. Because He holds success in store for the upright. He's a shield to the blameless. He guards the just. He protects the faithful. It seems like it would say, God gives those rewards of protection and guarding to those who are seeking wisdom. Because that's what it's all been talking about. If you seek wisdom, if you seek wisdom, you'll get the fear of the Lord, and God will give success to the upright. What? Is that a new topic? It's not a new topic. If you're seeking wisdom, you will find the fear of the Lord, and in finding the fear of the Lord, and in finding wisdom, what is wise to do is to be upright, blameless, and just. Okay, so if those things are true, if it's true that success comes to the upright, then it would be very wise to do what? To be upright. Yeah, and to learn how to be upright. That's why verse 9 starts out, the next then. So we had if. We had a then in verse 5 through 8. Now we have another then. Debbie, could you read, just read verse 9.
Then you will understand what is right and just and fair, every good path.
Yeah. If you seek wisdom, then you will get the fear of the Lord and the knowledge of God. And then verse 9, then you will understand what is right and just and fair, every good path. If it's true that all those things like success and protection come from the Lord, and He gives them to the upright and the just and the blameless, then the next wise step to pursue is I need to understand what's right, what is good, what is fair. Okay, then we have another 4. Here's why. Because verse 10. Debbie, can you read verse 10 also?
For wisdom will enter your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul.
Okay, so this becomes a we also didn't mention this. There's a couple times when your heart is mentioned in Proverbs, and it seems to me that it's always at key junctures. But once wisdom has entered your heart, it'll be pleasant to you, discretion will protect you, and understanding will guard you. But once it's inside you, then, once wisdom has entered your heart, then verses 12 and verses 16 tell what wisdom is going to do for you. So verse 12 says, wisdom will save you from the, and verse 16 starts, wisdom will save you from the. So there's two things. Once it's in your heart, there's two things it's going to save you from. So these are rewards. If you were going through and underlining all the rewards, you notice pretty quickly, well, a lot of the rewards are kind of like negative rewards. Like, here's what will happen to you if you don't have wisdom, so I guess that's actually a reward to save you from those things. So, let's see, Bev, could you read 12 through 15, the first thing wisdom saves you from once it's in your heart?
Wisdom will save you from the ways of wicked men, from men whose words are perverse, who have left the straight paths to walk in dark ways, who delight in doing wrong and rejoice in the perverseness of evil, whose paths are crooked and who are devious in their ways.
So there's all kinds of things in there. I just want to point out one about delighting in doing wrong. Have you known people like that?
Small children.
Well, well, yes, but some people delight in it in the sense of just not because I want the thing necessarily, but just because it's wrong, and it's almost like
Like their rebellion.
well, yeah, certainly that would be a separate category, but it's almost like a
Adrenaline rush.
Some of the videos of seeing someone get clocked on the street, where someone walks by and just smacks it, that's delighting in doing wrong.
Yes. And there's also an adrenaline rush. I knew a pastor who, when he was a teenager, they would rob cars, and he was from a wealthy family. He just did it for the adrenaline rush. Yeah, of like running from the cops and stuff like that. They loved it. But there's another kind. So we got what Tom's talking about, the adrenaline rush. Somebody else said something else. But there's another kind that I was thinking of. It's almost like a faux honesty. Like, I'm not one of these like people who's trying to be all good. Like, I'm just like a real dude. And sometimes I like break the rules or whatever. And it's almost like something we laugh about. There's all kinds of ways to delight in it. Okay. Verse 16 through 19. Let's see. Marty, could you read those?
Wisdom will save you from the adulterous woman, from the wayward woman and her seductive words, who has left the partner of her youth and ignored the covenant that she made before God. Surely her house leads down to death, and her paths to the spirits of the dead. None who go to her return or attain the paths of life.
Okay, so you're seeing paths come up all the time, right? This is where her path leads, and you will not find the path of life again. Notice the in a chapter that starts out, if you seek for wisdom, if you cry out for it, if you search for it, then all the rest of the chapters, all the thens, and the majority of them are not about wisdom. The majority are about being upright, walking blamelessly, avoiding being saved from the wicked and the perverse and the corrupt, and being saved from the adulterous woman who's seductive. She's left the partner of her youth. She has ignored the covenant she made with God. Because true wisdom is about what God delights in. It's about Him. That's why it starts with fearing Him. Because, like we said last week, if you focus on the non-God parts of wisdom in this book, it will be just the purely utilitarian aspects, but not the heart of it.
Did you say that true wisdom is delighting in God?
Well, true wisdom is about what God delights in.
So ignoring the covenant she made before God is ignoring wisdom.
It's ignoring her marriage. Because promiscuous and adulterous and prostitutes were all married women in the ancient world. Okay. So then thus you'll walk in the, verse 20, thus, because of all that, because wisdom will save you from those things, you'll walk in the paths of the good and keep the paths of the righteous. So the ways and the paths. And then there's some more rewards. The upright will live in the land, but the wicked will be cut off from it, verse 22. So, and because that's true, because the upright live in the land, this is how the four of 21. Because the upright live in the land and the wicked are cut off from it, then it is wise to stay away from wicked men and women. Okay, so we had a lot of rewards there. We have success, guarding, protection, living, being protected from the death that the adulterous woman leads to. Now, sometimes the adulterous woman leads to death because when her husband finds out, he'll kill you. Literally, kill you. But there's other things too. Okay, so let's look at the rewards that you found, hopefully, or if you didn't find them, you can just sort of peruse through there. Some chapters have a lot more than others, so I tried to, based on the amount of lines per chapter number on that page, that'll sort of give you a clue as to how much time to spend looking in one chapter. But what did you find from chapter 1? Some of the rewards of wisdom and this book in general.
Acquiring wise counsel.
Okay, good. What else? You can just call them out as you see them, or we'll sort of go through in order, starting with chapter 1.
Righteousness and justice.
Yeah, acquiring righteousness and justice. Prudence, good.
Increased learning.
Good.
Understanding.
Verse 9 says, it'll be a grace to your head and a chain to adorn your neck. Obviously, that's somewhat of a metaphor, but it's going to make you look better in the eyes of others, which is a reward. It's maybe not the greatest reward in the world, but it's a reward. The reward in oh yeah, good. 33. Safety, ease. What else in 33? Or that area?
Security with God.
Safe, peace.
Yeah, peace, no fear. Good. We can move on to chapter 2.
Knowledge of God. Oh,
Yeah, the knowledge of God, good. Well, we kind of went through chapter 2 together, so we don't need to list those. Let's skip to chapter 3.
kindness and truth.
Yeah, and sometimes some rewards are mentioned over and over again, so it's okay to mention them multiple times.
Length of days and long life.
Yeah. What about verse 3 of chapter 3?
Mercy and truth.
Put find favor and high esteem in the sight of the Lord.
Yeah, good. So favor and high esteem. So when someone esteems you, some translations say a good name. For esteem, yeah, respect from others and from God. So yeah, in the sight of God and man. Good. Verse 8 has one.
Health.
All these things are rewards. What about verse 10?
Prosperity.
Yeah, lots of crops and wine. Verse 16. What are the rewards? Long life. Riches. I mean, just think about just those three. There's like scores and scores in here.
Happiness.
Yeah, I mean, just think about, long life, riches, and honor. Who wouldn't want, if you said, I have 3 things I'll give you. You could take these 3 onions, or if you'd rather, you could have long life, riches, and honor.
Be able to judge what's right and wrong.
Yeah, that is a super important one. Because that's going to lead you down paths that lead to good things.
Restful sleep.
Yeah. Good. And then, this is going back a bit, but 17 and 18. In 17, you've got pleasantness and peace. In 18, you've got a tree of life. The author of Proverbs has read Genesis, so even though it's a metaphor here, it's not a literal tree of life like we had in Genesis and we will have in the future state. It's a metaphor that will be life. It'll continually provide you with life.
Would sound wisdom and discretion be one? Because by doing that, we're going to make the right decision.
Right. Yeah. So it's a direct reward and then a second. So reading this book gives you sound wisdom and discretion. Sound wisdom and discretion help you make good choices. Making the right choices bring you good things. And just like the video said, that's generally true. But there are exceptions, of course, to all of these. And we'll get into those more in Ecclesiastes. A little bit at the end of the lesson today, but more in 3 weeks when we get to Ecclesiastes. Okay, so there's so many. Like chapter 4, verses 4 and following, you got life, protection, being watched over, being exalted and honored, a crown of splendor. 4:10 and following, your years will be many, your steps won't be hampered, your path will have life. Your path will have light. And then 22, life and health. Chapter 5 is all about being kept away from the adulterous woman and all the horrible things that happen to those who go to her. Chapter 6, well, it is something you can avoid is poverty from being lazy. Again, at the end of chapter 6, you'll be kept from the adulterous woman and all the bad things that she brings. Chapter 7 is all about that as well, life and being kept away from the adulterous woman. Chapter 8, there's some good, in the middle and end of chapter 8, there's some good rewards listed. Anybody notice those? Uh, 8:18 and following. It's things that have been mentioned before, but there's a little added concept. 8:18 and following talks about riches and honor and enduring wealth. And then the end of 8:35 is life and favor from God and not harm. Okay, so there's more in 9, but there's a lot of repeats. Although repeats are significant because it shows what's going to come up a lot in your life if you follow these paths. Okay, so why in a book that starts out, these are the Proverbs of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 1, why does the Proverbs of Solomon not start till chapter 10? Why are these 9 chapters put here? Why do you think?
That's a good preference. It's pretty obvious as you read through them, but choose good, things are gonna be better.
Yeah. Yeah, good. And any other thoughts about why start out with these 9 chapters? Why wait so long to get to the Proverbs that the first verse said this book was going to be about?
Because you had to learn how to get there.
Yeah, you have to learn how to get there, and you have to learn to value them.
Yes.
By the end of 9 chapters, you're like, all right, give me these proverbs. These proverbs and this wisdom is going to give me so much good stuff. Give it to me. It makes you hunger for it.
If you just read from 10, then you don't know how to get there.
Right, yeah. And you don't know,
All of it.
yes. Good. Okay. Now, before we move on to question 3, any other thoughts about the first 9 chapters? Being the preface to this book. It's like a big, long introduction. Okay. So question 3 is, why is adultery such a major theme? It just came up again and again and again. I mean, there's lots of, being wicked and perverse came up a few times. Staying away from foolishness came up a few times. But adultery predominated these 9 chapters, did it not?
I read that it attacks your body, your mind, and your soul.
Okay, it attacks your body, your mind, and your soul. Good.
Well, there's, in 8:1, listen as wisdom calls out, hear as understanding raises her voice. So wisdom is given a female. And in 8:22, the Lord formed me, being wisdom, from the beginning before he created everything else. So the Lord and wisdom, that male-female partnership, created everything. And they created the model, male and female. And adultery subverts that model. And if you subvert that, I mean, marriage, male and female, good, but adultery subverts it.
Yeah, it breaks that covenant.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
I think of like the story of Gomer, and that adultery is leaving God and going seeking after.
Well, yeah, certainly it goes against God because, like in chapter 2, the adulterous woman ignores the covenant she made to God. It's good. And I actually think part of the reason why the author chose to personify, this is what Tom was saying, personify wisdom as female was in contrast to the adulterous woman. Now this, all these things apply to both men and women who are seeking wisdom. However, men were more often literate in the ancient world and would be studying this more. So this was more for young men. They were supposed to dispense wisdom into their home through their studies. Okay, so adultery in the book of Proverbs is seen as the ultimate foolishness for all the reasons we've talked about and more. Adultery is seen as the ultimate foolishness. Why?
Breaking God's covenant.
You're breaking God's covenant. Why else?
Well, practically speaking, it's a total waste of time.
Total waste of time.
I mean, momentary pleasure, but no growth, no production, no doing what God's plan.
Right. It's the quintessential foolishness. For a momentary pleasure, I bring destruction into my life. I tear apart my family, my marriage, the trust. I mean, think about it, the shame that it brings. Now, in our modern world, sometimes you can keep things hidden. Often it comes out. I mean, we've all known people, and it does come out somehow. I mean, the Bible says, be sure your sins will find you out. But, I mean, in the ancient world especially, when the average town could fit inside a gymnasium of today. That's how small each town was. You think word didn't get around, like who was visiting whose house when the husband was away? So it brings nothing good. In fact, all the things that it brings and the things that it destroys are all the things that 1 through 9 have been saying. You're going to get life, adultery brings death. You're going to get honor, adultery brings shame. You're going to get wealth, well, adultery makes you broke because you have to pay every time you do it. Now, not specifically in this what's presented here is that typically it's a prostitute. If you notice in chapter 7 when it really goes through like a wiser woman is looking out of her window and she's seeing the young men and he's going over to her corner. She's going to seduce him and she says, my husband's not at home. He's not going to come back till the full moon. I've been waiting for you specifically. And he took a big bag of money with him, so he's going to be gone a long time. I've got everything. I've got my bed all ready. I've got everything except the money that my husband took. So there's that whole thing. Okay, but anyway, my point is, everything that this book has been building up, fearing God. Well, someone who fears God doesn't do that. It goes against everything that this book has been presenting.
Jacob.
Yes.
Would a good example of that be Abraham submitting to take his wife's, creating basically all the problems in the Middle East for the past 3,000 years?
Yeah, I mean, it just...
3,000 years of misery, war.
Yeah, certainly. It just brings bad things. Notice, like, the more wise you are, the more bright your path becomes. The less you stumble, the less your steps are hampered. Well, I mean, just think about the lies and the trickery and the entanglements of all those lies, right? I mean, it's a really cliche, little pithy saying that I hate, but what a tangled web we weave when first we start to deceive, right? It becomes a web, and I told so-and-so this, so I have to keep that up. I told my wife something else, so I have to... It just hampers your steps. Okay. So for that and other reasons, adultery is seen as the ultimate foolishness in this book. Now, one last question before we get to something else, the new topic. Do you think the rewards listed in this book are literal?
Yes.
Wealth, riches. Yeah. Literal. I mean, if you live a wise life, you literally will have more money. I know a family who came on some hard times through no further fault of their own. Their place of work shut down. But they were saying, I really need to store this, and it's going to cost me, we're really hard up, but it's going to cost me $50 a month to get this storage thing. Because, we're moving away, we can't take it with us. I was like, well, what do you need to store so bad? Our table. I was like, well, why don't you just go buy, and go to a yard sale when you get to your new place and buy a new table? Like, we paid $1,000 for this table. It's really nice. I was like, well, maybe you shouldn't have paid so much. But then, because they paid so much, now they have to pay $50 a month more on top of that just to store it. That's like one example of all that, as you start to counsel people and just You just find the depth of foolishness and decisions that people are making, and it's hurting them.
So we have to leave because Salvation Army is coming to pick up our furniture. That was a good way to say it.
Okay.
Is there homework?
Yeah, 10 through 15. Chapters 10 through 15. Okay, and also, by the way, you can see from your notes we were about to get to Jesus, so
I have a quick question, Jacob.
you missed that, but you can read it in the notes.
Do you have, like, will you literally have a longer life? Like,
Yeah.
years added to your life?
Yes, certainly. I mean, well, first of all, in the Ten Commandments, it says people who honor their father and mother, it's the first of the Ten Commandments with a promise attached. Honor your father and mother so that it may go well with you and your years will be long. So God gives life. I mean, God is the source of our lives, and God gives life to people who please Him.
I was just going to say, my brother didn't live what I consider a very long life, and he loved the Lord and honored my parents.
Yeah.
So it's not...
It's not 100% true. It's not a guarantee. And we're going to come to that a little bit today, but
you
but it is
live a longer life if you lived in accordance to the Lord.
Yeah, so generally speaking, for two reasons. Number one is that God blesses you with longer life, often. He has other plans, but generally. Number two, it's wise to make healthy choices. It's just, there's so many things that it's wise to trust God, like lean not on your own understanding. And obviously, it's medically documented how bad stress is for your life. If you can just trust God and say, you know what, yeah, we got these problems. I'm just going to trust God. This is all going to work out somehow. I'm just going to do what's right, and we'll see what God does. But if you stress over it, that's just bad for your health. And obviously, stress and anxiety is a direct contrast to trusting God.
There's also something we always miss. Like statistically you can prove if you eat right, if you exercise, if you give, if you don't have any stress, your intake's all good, you're going to live longer as a statistical analysis. But then we don't know, somebody who dies good. Well, maybe God's got his house ready for him. He's like, look, the rest of your family's working on this for me. And because who can actually say that, we were doing a little study on heaven. It'd be better if you stayed here. Paul's example, it's better if I stay here because I'm helping other people be saved. But it would definitely be better for me personally to go on and be with Jesus.
Right. Yeah, and that's exactly where we're going. Because, yes, these rewards are literal. However, there is this kind of wisdom actually terminates in Jesus. We'll talk about why in a minute, but because it terminates in Jesus, therefore, while the wisdom is true that it preserves life and you don't love death and adultery is a bad choice and all that, while this wisdom is true, now that Jesus has come and the church has started, there is a higher order of wisdom. And that is to hate your life and love Jesus. And blessed are you when people persecute you. So there's a higher order of when you follow Jesus, people are going to hate you. Yes, if you make wise choices, you're going to get love and honor. But if you follow Jesus, because if the world hated him, the more like him you are, the more the world will hate you. So if you think of it as this is all true and good and everything, but there's the higher order of wisdom, what you find is people hear and you say, okay, well, you're making terrible choices. Look at Proverbs and learn the wisdom of making good choices. Right? And that's all true, and it hasn't changed. But in another sense, it has changed because now you say, it's not like a stages. You get this straight, then you can move on to that. It's not like that at all. But it's just living, like there's things when people were making terrible choices that you look at this to say, okay, I need to change this. But unrelated to that is the highest order where I'm going to pursue Jesus at the expense of everything else in my life. Right? Anybody know what Jim Elliot said when they said, this is a really poor choice. You're smart, you could have a successful career, you're going to go to the Auca Indians? What did Jim Elliot say? Anybody know?
It's better for him to go there and try to show others Jesus and lose his life than to keep it and...
Exactly. Yeah, and the specific quote is, he is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. Yeah, I have these things and these possibilities and this potential in my life, but no matter what, I'm going to lose all that. I'm going to give that all up and gain something I cannot lose. And that's not foolishness. That's wisdom. That's the higher order of wisdom that I'm talking about that Jesus brings. So, on page 4, let's see, we're back to Nancy. Could you read from Colossians 1 in the green box at the top of page 4? Sorry, the print is kind of small.
I want you to know how hard I am contending for you and for those at Laodicea, and for all who have not met me personally. My goal is that they may be encouraged in heart and united in love, so that they may have the full riches of complete understanding, in order that they may know the mystery of God, namely Christ, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge.
In him are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. So, the wisdom of God that was with him before the creation of the universe is woven into our world. It's just the way the world works. The video guy mentioned living along the grain of the universe. And it's all throughout the Bible, but it finds its completion and termination in Jesus. Jesus, I don't know if it's just from study or just because of who he is or because of how closely he walked with the Spirit, but Jesus absorbs all the wisdom of Proverbs, and you hear it come out. Wisdom is vindicated by her deeds. You hear it. You hear Proverbs come out of Jesus' lips, right? If you seek, you find. So much of what he says is from the Old Testament, but he also pushes beyond the Old Testament. So, I sort of broke it down, what she just read, so to make it easier to see. You can see verse 1. I want you to know, what do you want them to know? How hard I'm contending. Paul was contending. Who is he contending for? Underneath contending is for you and for those at Laodicea and for all who have not met me personally. I'm contending for all of you. Laodicea was just a city near Colossae, so it gets mentioned a lot in that letter. Now, okay, so all this contending, why is he contending? What's he contending for? Well, verse 2 tells the goal. My goal is 3 things, but 2 first. That they may be encouraged in heart and united in love. Why is that your goal for? Why do you want them to be encouraged in heart and united in love? So that, here's the reason why I want that for them. They may have the full riches of complete understanding. So you want them to be encouraged in heart, united in love, so they can have complete understanding. Why? What's the purpose of having complete understanding? In order that they may know the mystery of God. What's that? That's Christ. And in Christ are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. Okay. I feel like I maybe explained that a little bit poorly about the higher order of wisdom that Jesus brings. But any questions about that? Okay. Well, read chapters 10 through 15 for next week. Next week, Neil will be teaching. And then page 5 gives you the layout of that video, which I think is helpful.